Okay, so now it's time to style our Flamingo tile. We have our correct settings here within our HTML. We've got our div with its class of tile. That's our target. That's what we're going to select and style. Image, an H2, and a paragraph, and an anchor tag with the class of button. All as children of this div. The image, the H2, and the P we don't need to provide classes for because we're going to be able to target them as children inside that tile. The anchor tag for the link, we do want to put a class of button on that because it's conceivable we're going to have other links on this page, possibly, and we don't want every link to look like this particular button. We only want this one particular link to look like a button. So we're pretty much done with the HTML at this point. So we're going to flip over to our CSS file and we're going to get going from there. Let me flip over to real-time preview. You'll notice that there's some default padding that the browser has put in there. So let's get rid of that and set everything with our 0 set. So let's go to main.css. Let's go to the third line here and just add some lines so we can have some space. Let's go over to our snippets directory down here in the bottom right hand corner. We created snippets in class for the CSS reset, and that should be under the My Snippets directory. So let's scroll down and let's just double click CSS reset. It may be called 0 set on yours. Either way, it's the same thing. You'll notice that everything, all our margins and paddings are now gone. So that's what we want. And of course, it gets rid of that here within the within our preview mode. But let's go back to source, and we can go back to real-time preview to Google Chrome, and you'll see everything is actually correct because our header stylings are coming after the reset. Super important. Go back to Dreamweaver and go back to our main.css file, and you'll notice that here's our reset up top, margin 0, padding 0, and then our actual styling starts. So our H1 is not affected by this reset. If it was reversed, you would see all the padding and the margins getting wiped out for the H1. So let's style our div. Let's get onto that. We're going to go to the end of our file after the final curly brace for the H1. Hit return, and let's type .tile for tile, space, and then a curly brace, and Dreamweaver will go ahead and put in the closing brace, and let's hit return to add some space in there. Let's flip over to Photoshop and take a look at what we're building. I'm going to identify the styles of here and then jump in, move that out of the way, and then jump in and do this fairly quickly within the CSS designer. So we've got a border, we've got a drop shadow, we've got what looks like a slight color variation in here. Let's take a look and sample that, and yep, FEFA, it's kind of like a light yellow. While we're in here, let's go ahead and just copy that. That'll be helpful. Hit cancel. And we've got some padding, so let's take a look at the padding here. Go right to the edge, and we're looking at about 16 pixels of padding. Zoom out. So we've got a shadow that is centered on our box. We've got 16 pixels of padding, what looks like it is all around. And we've got a gray border, and we have a background. Zoom in. Let's take a look at what that border is. Let's select our box here, rectangle 1, and double click on the effect, and let's leave that open. We're going to come back to it. Let's go back to Dreamweaver. So we copied our background color. We're in tile. That's where we want to be. Let's go over here to the CSS selector. It has automatically popped us up as the tile class. We're ready to go. So let's start styling. Background. Click on the background color. We want to be in hex value, and that's what it is. We have our hash. Now in Photoshop, they don't put the hash in the color box. Here they do. So let's just select the 6 numbers here, and let's just paste. And that's our background color, hash, and then the background. Let's hit enter. That commits it. You'll see that it pops up over here. Good to go. Let's switch back to Photoshop. Let's take a look at our stroke. Our stroke is 1 pixel. It is 100%, and the color is a light gray, and let's find out exactly what that is, and that is D8, D8, D8. Notice the hash is outside of this box. So let's copy that, cancel, 1 pixel, solid border. We can see it's solid, and there's our color. Let's leave that open, jump back to Dreamweaver, and let's go do our border, which is the border area here. We want to do all sides. Let's go to width, choose pixels, and then click in there and type in 1, which is what our width was, and hit enter. Our style, click there, that is a solid. And then our color, click there, same exact thing we just did for background. Copy the numbers, paste, commit. There's a border color. You're starting to see it pop up around right underneath. See that light gray line underneath the dark gray line for the H1. So we're looking good. Let's go get our drop shadow. Drop shadow is a color. It is black. It's 22% opacity, which means that's going to be our alpha. And the size is 18 pixels. So that's what we need. 22% black, 18 pixel size. Let's flip on back to Dreamweaver. Go over to background, because that's where our box shadow is going to be. And let's scroll down to box shadow. H shadow and V shadow, those are our settings for moving the shadow off of the object. We're centered directly beneath it, so we want 0. And we want 0. The blur, well, that's the size. So let's click on that and hit 18. It's already defaulted to pixels. Photoshop uses size for the drop shadow. CSS uses blur. Let's go ahead, spread we don't need. Let's choose color. So now we are 22% black. So we have an alpha channel, which means we need to use RGBA. So let's go ahead and click on RGBA. And you'll see everything switches here to 0, 0, 0, which is black, and the 1.00, that is 100% opaque, means it's solid. Let's drag this slider over here, which is our alpha slider, and drag it down to 22. You see the numbers changing in the box there. Boom, 22. Let's validate that that actually happened over here. Great. Box shadow 000, 0.22. That's our 22% black. Excellent. That's what we want. We kind of see it happening here. That's good. We want to do that. Let's flip on back here to Photoshop. Cancel that. And we've got our padding to do. Let's flip back to Dreamweaver. And let's add our padding. That's under Layout. Scroll down on Layout to the padding section. Click our lock, so we only have to type the number once. Click the top there, 24 pixels. Hit enter, and that will give our pixel setting. Except it's not 24, it's 16. Select that again, hit 16, boom, drops it back down. There we go. So, so now let's set our width. Go back to Photoshop. Let's zoom out a little bit. We see our area here. So our width is actually going to be 300, but let's validate that. So if you hit Command and click on the layer, that's kind of a shortcut to make a marquee around it. And then you can go up here to your info palette and take a look, and there's your width. So it's getting the width of that marquee. So it's 300. We have a height of 594. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll see what happens there. Flip on back to Dreamweaver. Let's go back to Tile, Layout. Let's set our width to pixels. Let's click 300, Set our height 2 pixels and set that to 594. Okay, let's scroll down. There we go. Gives us our height. It's ending there, so that's good. We've got our border, but now we've got all this extra space out here. So what's happening here is we have not set the border box sizing property, because we just didn't do that yet. So we see what happens here. And if you remember, the box model is the border plus the padding plus the content plus the right padding plus the right border. That equals the actual total width. So this is actually 1 pixel plus 16 pixels plus this image, which is 268 pixels wide, plus 16 plus 1, which is a lot wider than 300. So we're actually about like 332 or so. So let's set our box sizing. So let's go up right above tile, line 19, hit return, give a couple sizes. We're going to set that on all the divs instead of just tile. So we're going to type div, curly brace, closes that, jump on over to our CSS designer, layout, box sizing, border box, boom, shrinks it back down. That's where we want to go. But if you look, we have a hard width set for our image, and that's actually really not what we want, because this is actually smaller than this. So we can increase the size of this to 302 pixels to accommodate for the borders, because remember when we took our padding size, let's jump in and zoom in here, we grabbed it from the edge. So we can either change our padding to 15 to accommodate the border, or do something else with the image. So right now, let's just accommodate for the border and set our padding to 15 instead. Let's jump back to Dreamweaver. Super easy to do. Go back to Tile. Go back to Layout. Scroll down here. Change it to 15. Done. Whoop, 165. Not what we wanted. Good old Dreamweaver. 15. Done. Great. So now you see we're a lot more even here. So that's good stuff. That's what we want. So we're set there. Now we want to center this. You guys remember the shortcut to centering is setting the margins to auto for left and right of the box. So we're on Tile again. Let's jump back here to our CSS designer. Scroll to the margin setting. Click this and choose auto. Click right and choose auto, and now we're automatically centered. See that we're kind of smacked up against the H1 here too. We don't want that. So let's give some outside margin to this div to give it some spacing. So we're going to go back, click on Tile again, highlights this. Let's scroll back down to margin, and let's choose margin top. We'll give it 32 pixels. And we'll go to bottom and do that as 32 pixels as well. And that'll give us some spacing. So that's starting to look real good. Let's style our text. You know we have an H2 and we know we have a paragraph. So let's go ahead and drop them in. Let's scroll up on our CSS right after the H1. Let's add our H2 curly brace, return, put our cursor after the final brace, hit return, P, curly brace. All right, ready to style our H2s, or ready to style our P tag. Jump back over to Photoshop. Let's zoom out. Let's check our Flamingo. It's a serif font. It's Georgia, just like the H1, so we're going to set that to Constantia. 16-point Georgia. Click character over here. 16 on 18 Georgia. Let's flip back. Dreamweaver. H2. Nicely sets H2 for us. Let's go to text. Let's set our font family to the Constantia one. That's got Georgia in the font stack. That's what we want. Our font size is 12 pixels. Our line height is 18 pixels. and our text align is, oh, you see that? Little dotted. The pixel did not get set. And you can tell that something weird happened here because there's a lot of space. That's wrong. Let's go back here and set us to pixels. That's what we want. And that's actually too small. It's actually 16. Let's change that back to 16. That's the size we want. All right. You notice that that's smashed up a little too tight to that image, and that's because there's no margin there. So we've got a margin going around our image here, which is the same as here, right? It says height of 16, but remember we changed this to 15, so let's make it the same. Flip back to Dreamweaver. We got to add our image. Let's go after the P tag, type IMG, curly brace, done. Let's go back over here to our CSS designer and let's set our bottom margin on that image to 15. That gives us our space. Looking good. You'll notice, if you remember, let's go back to the H2 on Photoshop, that this was actually bold. Georgia bold. When you use headers, there's a default styling that automatically bolds them. So we don't actually have to put that in there unless you have a reset that clears all that styling. Some resets do, our reset does not, so we're going to leave it. Let's choose the paragraph now because we're going to style that. And we're looking at 12 points on 18 points and Arial regular. Let's check the color. That's black. Let's check the color of the H2 as well, and that's black as well. So let's go ahead and set those. 12 and 18 for the paragraph, black color. Let's go back to Dreamweaver. Scroll up in our CSS. Let's go back to H2. Let's set our color. Go back to text. Text color right here. Black is set to an RGBA. We don't need RGBA because we're not doing alpha. Let's just choose hex. 6 zeros, that's black. Good to go. Let's go back to paragraph. CSS designer updates. We're already on text. Let's choose black. Enter. Font family, we're going to look for Arial. It is not at the front of the font stack. But where is it? Oh, Arial's right there. So we'll go ahead and use Gotham. So now we're using Constantia for our serif font for our headings. We're using Gotham for our body copy. Let's choose Gotham. Let's choose our font size, which is 12 pixels. Let's choose our line height, which was our line height. Let's go back to paragraph. Line height was 18. Back to Dreamweaver. Line height of pixels 18. Good. Great. All right, so now we've got some spacing issues here. What's going on? All right, we've got a lot of line height. Let's take a look at our paragraph settings and see what we did. Same thing happened here. The pixels didn't commit. There's no PX after the 18. And if we look over here on a CSS designer under the text tab, you'll see that it's 3 dashes again. So let's just click it and choose pixels. So that was a clicking flub, but you can see very quickly that if something's wrong, the page is going to let you know. So let's scroll down here. And all right, great, we're looking good. That's it for this. Next video, we're going to focus on styling the button.